know we on the spot. I said we on the spot, on the spot, on the spotlight.
Yeah.
102.3 KJLH Compton, Los Angeles.
Just imagine that you're trying to order a pizza and you pick up the phone to order the pizza and you call your favorite pizza parlor and the line has static and the call drops and the people on the other end at the pizza parlor can't hear you. And so you call another pizza place and the call gets through fine. So you can easily order a pizza from there. So you get your pizza from there even though it's not the place you want. Now imagine that you're ordering on the internet. And now with the phone service, that's illegal. The phone company can't decide which person they want to give good phone service to. They treat all calls the same. And so, imagine that they cut a deal with that one pizza parlor to give them good phone service at the expense of the other one. That's illegal. Phone companies are called common carriers, and they have to treat all calls the same. Now imagine that you're ordering it on the internet, and when you click on the website of the pizza place that you like, all of a sudden it loads real slow, you have trouble loading, you get frustrated, so you move on to another pizza company, and it loads right away. And that's because the other pizza company paid a little extra to the internet provider, and so you can get through. And so that's a real simple example of an absence of net neutrality. And so the argument is, should internet carriers have to treat all content providers the same or differently? And it sounds interesting with a pizza parlor, but imagine it's something more important. If the internet providers can pick and choose who they're going to allow good communication with, it has major, major implications for our society.
And it's interesting that the big companies are lining up on different sides of this issue. You would think all huge companies would be like, let's get rid of net neutrality because I can afford to buy access. But what we're seeing is the big corporations, especially even tech corporations, are lining up on different sides of this issue. Jasmine Koenig, how do you see that in terms of, why did Apple finally come out in support of net neutrality, but other companies are, saying, we think the rules need to change. This is not allowing us to make the money. This is restricting the free market, and we're not a public utility.
I think some of that comes from them knowing who their customers are. If I have a company and a lot of my customers are from, underserved communities or communities of color, it's in my best interest to support net neutrality so that I can make sure that they have access to my product, to my website, to whatever it is that I'm pushing over the internet. And so I think in communities of color, period, we haven't really been on the net neutrality issue the way that we should be, considering the fact that we all use the internet. And especially
in fact, people of color use it at a greater rate, especially when you talk about smartphones and other devices, wearable devices. Right,
exactly. And I'll take it, make it even more personal to the Front Page family. A lot of people who listen to the Front Page dig for news. They don't just, see what's on Fox or ABC and go with that. They want to know, let me go online. Let me find out what's really going on. And, that's, the internet is sort of the leveler now, where you can sort of bypass mainstream media to, get directly to what a situation is. Like you had a previous caller this morning call about the story in New Hampshire that she saw on Yahoo News.
Right. So when you have the internet, you can go see what the right wing is saying, see what the left wing is saying, see what the mainstream is saying, and then figure out what the truth is, which is somewhere in between. And if some websites and some news sources are slowed down and others are sped up, it can control what our actual perspective is on the story. How does, are there implications for that, John Deere, from a legal perspective in terms of the repression of free speech?
Absolutely. That's really what's at stake. And it's not even just necessarily slowing down communications. There have already been some very limited cases where internet providers have tried to censor particular conduct. They didn't think somehow it matched their brand and their image, so they didn't want to be transmitting it. It's been very limited, but under the rules they write, will they be able to slow it down so much that it's actually, effectively blocked, or will they even be able to block certain content? So anyone in an underserved community, and really all of us, no matter what community you're in, it's endangering the very essence of free speech.
Well, the new FCC commissioner, this guy Ajit Pai, who is the appointee of Donald Trump, the new FCC commissioner Ajit Pai, is now wanting to get rid of net neutrality. He opened it up for comment. There were millions of comments, and those comments were released too late for it to make an impact in terms of the deadline for Congress. What do you think, how much of a threat is this, Jasmine? You think, you write a lot of unpopular things, or popular depending on your viewpoint politically, online.
Thank you.
You do a lot of critique of police departments and politicians. What do you think the impact could be in terms of your ability to get your message out online?
This is critical. I mean, one of the reasons why this issue is so important to our community is because with the internet, we've been able to bypass traditional media and tell our own stories. That was particularly important looking at Hurricane Irma, looking at some of the other situations that have happened around the country. That never would have happened, had there not been net neutrality.
I mean, you look at a story like Trayvon Martin.
Right.
The story of Trayvon Martin would never have gone into the mainstream media if it wasn't for everyday people on the ground, Twitter, social media, blogging, etc.
And you would think that our president, as much as he tweets and relies on the internet to get his message out to people, that he would understand that. But
he's the president of the United States. His message is going to get out regardless.
Yes, but this particular president uses Twitter like no one else and uses the internet. But, back to net neutrality, I mean, look, it helped movements like Black Lives Matter. It's helped people like myself be able to get national attention on issues just by being able to, write and put it up and have people be able to access it. And I think that, if we were to do away with that, we're essentially taking away our ability to communicate. We're going back into the dark days where we have to wait once a week for the black newspaper to come out to tell us what's going on with our people on the other side of the country.
Everyone, this issue of distribution, the ability to have direct access to your listeners or to your viewers is something that's new to this age. I mean, there was a time when you had to have a show greenlit. Now you can just put it up yourself on YouTube. John Deere, you have a YouTube channel, and you have your own followers. This is now actually competing with a lot of major networks. I know, for example, my son would rather watch YouTube shows than watch television on traditional networks. Is this, for content providers like yourself who have YouTube shows, is this an issue that you worry about, how net neutrality will impact your access to your audience?
There's a couple issues here. How it impacts on big networks like Twitter and YouTube may be different because they'll pay the freight. But then we're subject to YouTube's policies and Twitter's policies, and both of those networks and Facebook and all of them are facing content challenges, and so they're making decisions about what content they will allow to pass through. They're already doing that. They run a private network. They're allowed to do that. But for us to have direct contact with people, we can set up our own website if we want right now, and if I set up a little website, I'm on the same footing as ABC or any of the major content providers.
Right now, you have the same access to listeners or viewers as ABC or Netflix or anybody else because we have net neutrality. But if net neutrality was to be diminished or abolished and we had a different model, how could that change?
Then our only access may be through Facebook and YouTube in that way. And then we're subject to their rules. Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all of them take down content that they find objectionable, and so and some of the content's so objectionable that most people would agree it's objectionable. But which content is that should be taken down? If net neutrality goes away, you can't guide them to your own website. They might not be able to get to it. So right now you can tweet out a tweet and say see my website. And then they come there, and then you're unfettered. You have direct access to your people. You can say whatever you need to say, and let the marketplace of ideas determine whether your content's valuable or not. Let people listen to it and debate it and determine whether it's valuable. If net neutrality goes away, then suddenly your only access is through Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. And we know Facebook algorithms nobody understands. So you don't know who your content's going to. All the people that like you, they still don't get your content. And Facebook and Twitter and YouTube decide which content they want to push. So net neutrality has an enormous amount at stake for us.
Well, President Barack Obama was a proponent of this. Of course, President Trump has put in his own FCC commissioner with the actual opposite kind of viewpoint. And some say that this should not be going back and forth from administration to administration. Every time someone appoints a new FCC director, we get a new policy about net neutrality. Does this belong in the hands of Congress, this issue of net neutrality? Jasmine?
I would say yes, because then you're also putting it in the hands of the public, because the public elects the members of Congress. Whereas with the FCC chairman, each president gets an opportunity to bring in someone new. And like you said, we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And we need to really just regulate this and be done with it. Everyone should have unfettered access to the internet, whether they're poor, whether they're wealthy, no matter what part of town they're in. And so, yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah, we definitely should, put this back in the hands, or put this in the hands of Congress, therefore putting it in our hands, because, folks need to remember, every 2 years we elect members of Congress.
Now, if Congress were to take this up, presumably they would put in place a set of laws governing access to the internet and how it is regulated, so that it wouldn't come up every time there was a new administration. Right. John Deere, from a legal perspective and just from your personal perspective as a content creator, what are some of the things that they could and should look at putting into such a law?
Well, in my view, they should treat the internet as a common carrier, and internet service providers as a common carrier. And that means they should prevent them from discriminating against particular content. It should be treated just like the telephone lines. And it should be pretty clear. Now, it isn't a straightforward, simple issue. There will always be certain types of content issues, and that's where there's a legitimate struggle. So, for example, are they allowed to regulate content if they need to do it to manage traffic? So a certain website starts sucking down all the bandwidth, and they just don't have enough bandwidth to service everybody. Can they, at that point, throttle that website just so there's enough to go around? And there are complicated issues like that. But in general, it should be content neutral. It should be the same rules for everybody. It should be a level playing field. Anyone can play on it. And that was always the great promise of the internet from the beginning, was that it's a complete democracy. You can put up your website. If nobody looks at it, okay, figure out how to get some content that people want to see. But
it's a complete democracy if you're in a democracy. If you're not in a democracy, of course, whatever the government of your nation is, right, can throttle certain websites. And we've seen that in countries like China and many other countries where they are just outright banning certain websites, or you can't access Facebook. I did some traveling this summer, and I noticed that in some countries you can't get, you just don't have access to the same kind of freedom that we have access to. This issue of internet freedom is very tied to democracy. Should it be decided by the Congress, or should it be decided by the FCC, or is there some middle ground? John Deere.
I think Congress needs to step in and act. Even major content providers are having to switch gears all the time. They don't know where the ground is on this issue. And so I think it's time for Congress to step in and give us some protections. I'm concerned about what Congress might do in this environment right now, but are
they doing anything right now? Clearly you have a Republican majority in both houses, so what Congress ends up doing may not look that different from what the FCC does. Jasmine Canick, as a content provider yourself and a sometimes controversial content provider, what do you think that content providers, and particularly community-based organizations, community activists, should be doing to steer this issue in their favor?
They need to be involved, like with any legislative issue, especially one that's controversial. one that affects you, you need to be involved. So, there was a comment period, right, around what was going on with the FCC, and millions of people submitted comments, and most of them were in favor of net neutrality. And again, because remember, net neutrality gives artists, activists, community leaders, whistleblowers, citizen journalists, all a way to be a part of the conversation. And as we've been discussing, it is on a level ground. And right now we're looking at about four companies that control 60% of the broadband and internet access in America. And, their argument is that, providing net neutrality means that they're going to have to cut their investments in, underserved communities in America. But a lot of people don't believe that's true.
Right. That is coming at the same time as Facebook is expanding and actually installing satellites so they can access more people in remote, underdeveloped areas. 22 million people commented on net neutrality on the FCC comment period. 13,000 pages were released one day before it would have made a difference in being able to repeal their decision. Perhaps this should go to Congress. We will certainly see what happens in the days ahead. Jasmine Canick, where can we find you online?
At Jasmine, and as long as we have net neutrality, jasmineonline.com.
And Attorney John Deere.
And I have a website. You can just Google me, Jonathan Deere. But I also have my social media website, and that's the fun one. And I actually have an article put up about net neutrality on there right now. And you can find me at Curious John. That's Jon, CuriousJon.com.
All this will be on the KJLH website, KJLHradio.com.
KJLHradio.com.
We on the spot. I say we on the spot, on the spot, on the spotlight.